Let me introduce myself. I'm Joanne Persico, president of GCN Media Services, makers of One Count. And today's panel is going to be on segmenting and targeting for better marketing. And before I introduce the panelists, I just wanted to say this is a passionate topic for One Count. What we are, we're an audience analytics platform. And so what we do is we're able to identify users to a site, unknown and known users, and then what we're able to do is target those users for ad targeting and content targeting, and then the publishers are allowed to monetize that information because we know exactly who is on your sites, what they're consuming, and how they're engaged with you. And what's interesting about that is the targeting. You know, we integrate with DoubleClick and OpenX, and so we're able to target all these great banners to specific people in your database. And so with that, I wanted to introduce our two speakers. We have a phenomenal two ladies here that are going to really have a wonderful presentation. Cindy Carter is the president of FDAnews, and Helen Hoart is the president of Yikes Media. And they've been longtime friends, actually, I just found out, and work together. So you guys are going to come up here? Are you going to do something down here first?
We'd like to just start down
Perfect.
here. There's a lot of knowledge in this room. I look around and I see a lot of people who know a lot about marketing and marketing segmentation. So we're going to go through our presentation, have a Q&A. Hopefully we'll have time for some discussion. So I believe the slides are up. So I'm just going to start very briefly. I mean, as so many of you know, it's all about the buckets. It's about putting your prospects in the right buckets. And the reason why you do that is that you're going to run relevant and more profitable, effective campaigns. But there's some other stuff that it also comes along with segmenting, and that's that you protect your reputation. You really do enhance deliverability, especially if you use a spigot approach, depending on what the segments are. And you can market more if you segment your audience. And then ultimately, which is very important for those of us in the subscription business, you have much better retention. So just this is a real quick review. There's tons of ways to segment your audience. You can segment it using demographic information. We've been doing that for years. You know, people who live on the West Coast and the East Coast are our best audience. You can use demographic, age, geographic, where people live. Psychographic, people have started using. A really important one, and if you don't do anything else, just kind of do both recency, how recent. I mean, this has been the whole thing. If you have somebody who's active with you, they're a really good prospect, and that's why you want to get in touch with them more frequently. Then there's the behavioral, which can be very important and very useful. Instead of saying, your attribute is that you are middle income and 50 plus, but look at the behavioral attributes of the person. That this person, you can either look at the behavioral attributes based on their behavior on your site or with your products, or behavior based on their general behaviors, like they're readers, they're interested in classical music, they're interested in investing. And then, you also go down to business. I mean, but one of the things that I think so often that we do when we look at kind of business, we go to title. And instead of title, I think you really have to ask somebody and try to find out what tasks they do. Because somebody can be, the chief financial officer, but really he's spending all of his time trying to find the right computer software for the company. So you really have to find out there, and that's where you can go back to psychographic information. And then value-based. How valuable are they to you? Where are they in the marketing funnel? So just a very brief overview. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was manual versus automated segmentation. Both my experience and Cindy's experience has been deeply using manual. And what I will say about that is even if you go to an automated system, you have to remember that it's still going to be very people intensive. It's the people who are going to figure out what your segments are. So you just can't go and turn on the automation and make it work. You still have to spend the time, build the foundation, and then use the tools so that, because they can make executing the strategy easier. But it's not going to develop the strategy. And then these are just some companies that you can work with. We just heard that there are other companies, and I'm sure, you know, there are many more who can be very, very helpful. But the caveat is, it's about you, and it's about your knowledge of your consumer or B2B prospect and customer base. You know, and when I think of segmentation, I also think about it in two ways. The first way is segmenting my prospects. And my prospects, I mean, we've been doing this for years with lists. I mean, you know, we want somebody who is within this zip code or SCF. We want somebody who's within this age group. We want males, we want females. That's all segmentation. When we were just doing straight list rental, we were doing a source of segmentation. But now it's also, you have to start segmenting your customer base as well, especially with the kind of marketing that we're doing. So that's the second one, and you're segmenting your customer base based on what they're telling you through a variety of different ways. And also your prospect base could be somebody who's just come in through you know, a free easy and a free white paper. So that person, you know, is, you know, maybe the tire kicker. And then you have to figure out from there where they're going to go and what bucket they fit in. So it's really important to start tracking those behaviors. Okay, so I'm going to do just a very brief case study for a client that I worked with. And then Cindy's going to go into much more detail in how they do segmentation at FDAnews. But this client was in a B2B market. It was evenly split between men and women. It was primarily a bi-coastal market. There were some little dots of people in other areas. It was not the top guns. It was middle management. It was consultants. It was lawyers. It was small companies, and it was big companies. So if you look at that, it's kind of fragmented. But all these people were interested in the product and the content that people wanted to buy. What they were doing was they were sending out, like a lot of us have done in the past, just sending out an email. You know, hey, come try what I have. And they were like, well, that's not working so well, so maybe let's try sending out a white paper and starting to qualify people. So they sent out a promotion, and the offer was to download the white paper. So customer 1 opened the promotion and didn't act. Customer 2 opened the promotion and downloaded the free white paper. Customer 3 downloaded the white paper and accepted a sales call. I mean, that was the premise, that if you accepted the white paper, you were going to hear from the company. And customer 4 downloaded the white paper, accepted a sales call, and signed up for the trial, which was the ultimate goal of this particular. So now, but why? Why did this happen? I mean, did we just get lucky? We found customer 4. They all got the same offer. They all did different things, which happens all the time. We know that in our marketing. So, you know, the questions are, you know, is customer 1, they just weren't relevant? They just didn't care. They were not interested. Customer 2, you know, they download something for free. You know, do they go in the tire kicker bucket? Or is there something more that we could do, but we just don't know enough about them? And finally, there's, you know, the customer who says the information is relevant, and they start moving along the sales funnel. And tracking people along the sales funnel is really, really important, because there are some people who just get stuck there, and you can never get them to the ultimate goal. So, you know, trying to figure out what is going to motivate them to get them there. And then customer 4 was the winner. I mean, they made the goal that we wanted, which was to sign up for a trial to the subscription. But why? We don't know. We really don't know. So one solution that I've used, and I know several other people, at least from the SIPA side of the family, have used successfully, is the notion of personas, where you really look, because as I was describing the prospects for this particular publication, they were from all over the place. It's big companies, small companies, East Coast, West Coast, consultants, middle managers, men, women. So how do you start constructing a persona about the various people? Because various personas are going to react in different ways. They're going to have different different reactions to what you're offering. It was like when we were hearing earlier about Netflix. You know, just seeing a picture of a happy family watching Netflix doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to reach the person who sees that ad. But, you know, if all of a sudden you're advertising Game of Thrones or, you know, I'm not sure what else is on Netflix. I don't even know if Game of Thrones is on Netflix. But if you reach them with the right thing, or if HBO is, you know, promoting House of Cards or Orange is the New Black, and that's what you're interested in, you're like, oh yeah, I really do want HBO. And now that they're letting you just stream it, it's even cheaper. So that's what it's about. It's finding out about the people in your database, and it can be your prospect database, and it can be your customer database. Your prospect database to get them to move quicker along that marketing funnel, in your customer database to send them the most relevant offers. Because one of the things that we are really having is the problem is with the, you know, just people getting inundated with offers. But if your offer is relevant, you can actually up your marketing to them. And I've seen this happen with clients of mine. So you create these personas, and you're looking at roles, not titles. You know, what is that person really actually doing on the job? You, in the way that you can do this, and there's lots of ways to come up with that information. You can use interviews with customers and prospects. That's one way to do it. Most often especially in our customer databases, we know title. So you can segment it by title and do some interviews. It's a little harder with prospects, but if you have some data forms, sometimes you can do that. Your sales team is a really, really great way to find out more about your customers. I mean, they're talking to prospects and to your customers. But so is your customer service team. They're the ones who are on the front lines when they're calling up, you know, annoyed about something or needing something, and they oftentimes have a very good sense of what some of the customer problems are. Surveys, I've used surveys very successfully to find out more about customers, and the questions that really are the best to use in surveys are the questions like what's keeping you up at night. And then you can try to start correlating that with the role. Another way to do it is to use data forms on your website. And I know that lots of times people don't want to ask anybody to fill out a long form. You know, it's like, well, no, I just want them to, you know, download the white paper, and then I'll get some more information later. And that's a balance. It's a balance between, you know, how you set up your goals. But by using longer data forms, you can actually start asking some really important information. You have to make a decision of where along the line you want to do that. But at some point, you really want to get rid of the tire kickers. And one of the ways to do that is to say, look, I'm going to give you something for free, for example, a white paper. But in exchange for that white paper, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself. And that's how you then start to, you know, build the segments. And then once you have that information, then you can start mapping the various content to personas. Because that's the other thing, that we're all in content business. We all have lots of content. But somebody's going to buy when the content or the offer, which also can be mapped to personas, is appropriate to them. So let's see what happened with this case study. So customer one is this very busy, harried, on the road, and the notion of downloading a white paper is just totally a non-starter. I mean, he or she works out of his or her car. I have a vision of this person as their shirt tail is always hanging out. They've got kind of papers, they've got their tablet, they've got their phone, the earpiece, so they're very, very busy. Customer number two downloaded the white paper, but they're the value shopper. You track them along the line, but they may just be the tire kicker. Ed Coburn, who is here in the audience, and I worked together with Harvard Medical School, and about 80% of our email lists were, you know, just give me the free information and I'm never going to do anything with it. That was fine for Harvard Medical School because part of its mission was education not only of doctors but of the public. So that was fine. You know, we were happy to, you know, really have people get really good health information. So customer three, who agreed to to the white paper and to the sales call was in corporate. They're sitting at their desk. They're available. But then you find out that they have a tech interest. You didn't know that. So then you can start really tailoring offers with products that have at least some tech component. So you increase the likelihood of their becoming a customer for you, because you know that this is what they're doing right now. This is their role, not their title, but their role. Customer 4, as it turns out, is really customer 1. Customer 4 finally got an offer that was geared to the fact that, you know, she's in her car all the time, that she doesn't have time to sit down and forget downloading a white paper. She's not going to read a white paper. So the offer was really tailored to her lifestyle, and it turned out that it was an app that was really, really useful to her. But if we hadn't done that, customer 4 would never have converted, and we would have lost, you know, something really important. So for me, in looking at segmentation, whether you're going to do it, you know, using automated systems or doing it manually, the really important thing is to dig down deep into who and what your customers are, and to try and get a sense of their behaviors. You can do some really interesting things, like once you know that somebody has an interest, let's say in tech. Let's say that you're in a market that has just a component of tech to it, but once you know that, you know, so they buy one thing, and then you can start triggered offers, you know, and moving them up along the value chain. So these are just some other points to consider. If you segment, do something. I've worked with several companies who said, oh yeah, we have a customer-centric database, and we really have a lot of information about our customers, and it's just great. You know, we're customer-focused, and we're customer-centric, and, you know, that's what we do. And then you say, okay, so what buckets are they in? Well, they're in prospects and customers. And then you say, well, you know, then what are you doing with your segment? And they're not. So they've taken the time to try to learn about their customers, but then they've not done anything with it. So if you're going to segment, do something. At a minimum, segment by recency, or segment by how active the person is. You can really save yourself a lot of heartache depending on how much, and I'm talking about email right now, depending on how much you email, if you really segment people by those who open, and those who click, and those who haven't opened very often. And you just don't hit the haven't opened very often. And every once in a while, you go back and you try to figure out how you can activate them. But that really is important in terms of your reputation. So as I was saying, you want to mail your active separately. They're your best prospects. You want to mail the person who buys everything, but make sure that you understand the everything that person is buying. And then the other thing that I have found is to be really, really important, because so many of us have lots of content. So now the next job is to create a content roadmap and map that to your various segments. You know, whether it's by sort of interest or by or even by title. But I found usually doing a content roadmap based on interest and behavior works really, really well, and then you can increase sales and hopefully move them up along the funnel. There's a couple of things I've been looking at that are at least were new to me. One was web push, and the man from Taboola was talking about it a little bit. But that, in addition to having the stuff, if you like this, there's more the Amazon Taboola model. There's also now the web push, where all of a sudden you're reading something and the little box comes up. If you'd like to see more of this, click here. That's again how you start building a segment. If somebody likes Kim Kardashian, then they'll like Khloe, and I don't know who they are, but that's how you build the segment. So that's something new and that's interesting. And then in advertising, by building your segments, you're really offering your sponsors or your advertisers a whole lot more quality when you can tell them, okay, this is the segment that responds to, financial information. This is the segment that responds to tech information. So I am going to turn it over to Ms. Carter.
Thank you. Let's see if I can see something. I am talking about FDAnews segments its list into 52 buckets consisting of 80,000 names. So if you do the math, you see that some of our buckets are pretty tiny. We really do segment in a very, very specific way. Each bucket is based on a mix of demographic, behavioral, and purchasing data. And I'll go into that a little bit more as we go along. The bucket that we put them into determines what marketing they get and the frequency of that marketing. We market some of those buckets up to 5 times a day. And we're able to sort of get away with that because we are so segmented. And our unsubscribe rates are very tiny. We watch these things really carefully. So I'm a big believer in segmentation. Every week, our list manager pre-codes all new names that come onto our file from whatever source to determine which bucket they go to. And every week, she goes through every purchase that occurred that week to determine if that customer, who for the most part will have come from an existing bucket, whether or not they still belong in that bucket based on their most recent purchasing behavior. Sometimes they stay where they are, and sometimes we move them. Every week, a team of 3, including me, goes through the coding and makes adjustments. And this may seem like an odd thing for a CEO to do. Now, we are a small company, but it's incredibly valuable. For me to see this, I'm a product developer by sort of experience and training, and I see patterns and I see things of types of people coming onto the file that my COO and the list manager might not catch. So it really has led us to create, new buckets for sure, new products, new things, and it's a very important thing to do. It's kind of been eye-opening. And you also see who your best customers are, like on a weekly basis. You'll see who's just buying more and more. And sometimes we'll sit there and talk about a recent purchase. And it'd be like, well, why does she want that? Because she'll have a job title that might be on the drug side. We write about drug and device regulation. And we might see somebody who's clearly from a device company, bought predominantly device-type products, suddenly buying a drug product. And we'll be like, well, what the heck happened here? And sometimes we can sort of see why that might be. And depending on the type of product, we probably won't move her or him out of a device bucket, but sometimes we might. We have what we call mixed buckets, and I'll go through that again in a little bit. And as I said, the process uncovers trends and information that we can then use for sales targeting. So our sales people will call people. If we see a certain trend emerging, we'll create new products, as I mentioned here. And just so you know, the size that we're doing on a weekly basis, we review several hundred names a week. And once the pre-coding is done, which takes more time and effort, I probably spend an hour to 2 a week on this, on average. This is what we do with new names. These are not people who've been in our marketing or e-zine subscriber files. We have free e-zines that we obviously use to market product, and we also have what we call our core marketing buckets. If we have an email address only, the bucket placement is then going to be what they signed up for. So if it's a white paper or an e-zine, say on drugs, they're going to go into the drug bucket. If it's a white paper that's on inspections, we actually will move them into a more specific, relatively tiny bucket based on that behavior. And it will be based on their behavior, not necessarily on their title. That the behavior will trump title for us. And you can see here, they sign up for a device e-zine, they're put into what we call the device non-buyer bucket. At that level, all we have is an email address. We don't really know more about you, so that's where we put you there. If they signed up for both drug and device, you're in what we call a mixed bucket. If they've given us title and company, we'll take those into account, but if they have quality in their title, we'd probably put them in a quality bucket. Again, we don't really have any more behavior on you except that you've signed up for drug or device. So then the title will take precedence at that point. It's the quality title. We'll put them in a quality bucket. Personal emails like Gmail, Yahoo, or MSN without a company name, we put in a very low frequency bucket. Partly because we believe that there are consumers that come on our file and they probably are not going to buy. But I will tell you one interesting trend from doing this is that increasingly we see people with corporate titles who are using their personal emails to actually get our material. And I've seen that actually increase in the last, 4 to 6 months, I would say. So that's been an interesting trend. Not that I can explain it, but I can tell you that it's happening, at least in our marketplace. And you're nodding, Ed, you're seeing the same thing? Are terrible, right. Yeah. Yeah. We were surprised, and you're right, it probably isn't that surprising since these are big pharma and big to small medical device companies. But I think the filtering is probably getting them so that they don't actually want to do this. So we'll move you out of the low frequency buckets if your behavior encourages us to do that. If you come in from, say, Google AdWords, a white paper download, LinkedIn trial sign up, we know a little bit more. Your placement is based on what they downloaded, an ad they responded to, or a trial they took, and then their job title and company type. So all of these things are taken into account. Same with forward to a friend. Their bucket placement will be the subject matter of the email that they were forwarded, their job company and company type. And they're generally put into a low frequency bucket because 5 times a day we try not to start people off in that bucket if we can avoid it. Webinar attendees, these are not the people who bought the webinar, but people who attended the webinar. They're going to be put based into that subject matter for the webinar and then followed by their job title and company type. People who buy for the first time from us, these are not names who have showing up on a marketing or an e-zine file. Their bucket placement is going to be based on their current purchase first, followed by their job title and company type. And first-time buyers who've been on our marketing file for a while, again, going to be based on their current purchase. Now, some of these cases, it actually means moving people from one bucket to another. If, for example, the first-time buyer was in what we call a drug non-buyer file, and they suddenly buy a book on inspections, then we're going to move them into an inspection bucket or a quality bucket, where we know now that they're sort of winnowing themselves down. And again, if they decide to sort of go off the reservation and buy something that's not quality or inspection related, we might consider moving their bucket again to broaden it. So it's a moving target in some cases. But we don't, on a weekly basis, we're not moving every single person around. Generally, for a lot of people, they are staying in the bucket that we put them in the first place. A new purchase from an existing customer, it may change based on the new purchase, but not necessarily. And another benefit to this is actually seeing on a weekly basis our best buyers. They're sort of in front of me, they're in front of my face, I know what they're buying, and you get to know these people a lot better when you're actually watching this, and I find it a really good exercise. Tom? Correct. Yeah, they're only in one, on our marketing file, you were only in there one time. They get put into like a mixed bucket, where we're going to serve them up a different mix of stuff. We find that an easier way to control the frequency rather than have them on the file multiple times. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Per name, about $64. So, they're generally, when all is taken into account, that's about where we are. Customer adjustments, we make the frequency and subject matter. They can adjust the frequency themselves, so we allow them to come in, and if somebody wants a lower frequency, we don't change that decision, obviously. If they put themselves into a once-a-day bucket, that's really where they stay. Or if they want to get more than that, we'll let them do that too. Customers who haven't opened in 6 months but still have active email addresses are put in a re-engagement bucket with a lower frequency. They're really drip campaigns. We try to get them to come back to us, so they're moved on a regular basis. And this just shows you a collection of our different buckets and the number of e-blasts they get per day. So you see multi-buyer's device. These are people who buy all kinds of different stuff within the multi-buyer file. Quality people, regulatory people, once a day, people who've come from our e-zine, people who have bought inspections. New this week, these are people who actually are only getting one per week. They've put themselves into a very low frequency. Then we have device non-buyers, quality non-buyers, regulatory, and then you see the re-engagement file. So these are all, we have a version that's identical to this for drug, and we have a version that's identical to this for drug and device. So those are the mixed buckets where people are flipping back and forth between different type of purchases. I have two full-time people who do list management. Now they in part do this sort of onboarding and management, but they also do all of our email deployment, and they also are handling the actual production part of the email. And one of them actually spends about 25% of her time actually on the ad side of our business. So it's really a pretty efficient process. We're small staff, and we try to do this very quickly. But it's very important to us because we really are in such a narrow niche. And for us to get away with this level of marketing, we would have nobody left if we didn't target so precisely. It really is not extremely labor. It's more labor intensive, I think. Not as labor intensive as it sounds. The process goes much more quickly than you think.
I was going to say that it's the setup. It's the early work that goes into it that takes them.
That is completely true. I remember days sitting around the conference table in my office, and we've been doing this for a very long time, and we would literally be sitting there, a team of people, holding onto our heads, going, oh my God, how do we break all this up? How do we move these people around without it becoming our full-time jobs? And it is the upfront work and the thought that goes into it, and understanding your product mix and understanding your customers as best you can. But it is, at first, it's kind of a mind-bending process. I'm so used to it now, I don't even think about it, but I do remember those early painful days of sitting around a conference table. We actually started doing this less frequently, as you can imagine. We did it like every 2 weeks in the beginning, and then actually ratcheted it up. We wanted to be more responsive to the people who were buying. I would say that to create these buckets, we probably worked on it in the very beginning for a couple of months, and it was not 100% of our time, but it's a kind of thought process where you actually have to sort of walk away, because your mind gets so kind of turned around as you're trying to figure all this out. We had to sort of put it aside, walk away, and then come back to it, or we would have gone crazy. But there's some of them are really pretty tiny. The 80,000 names on the marketing side of our file. That doesn't count our e-zine. We have 120,000 names on the free e-zine side of our file. Now, someone that is not deduped, I think if you dedupe it, it probably comes down to about 75,000 on a unique basis, because people can sign up for more than one e-zine. So that side of our file you're in there receiving multiple products. On the marketing side, you're only in there once. Because we're such a niche, we're so niched, it's, I think, very difficult we haven't encountered yet a program that can handle this in this level of specificity for us. Maybe it's out there and we don't know about it. That's quite possible. I actually have one publishing colleague, he's a colleague and friend of quite a few of us, who actually has automated this process. But I know that he custom built his product. He did not use anything off the shelf. It was built by someone. It's an amazing, amazing thing that he's done. But I know it took him quite a significant investment and quite a long period of time.
I just want to say that, especially if you have larger lists, I mean, her process is not going to work for you.
It's just not, yeah.
And if you have larger lists, I mean, certainly some of the tools that are out there are really good and worth investigating. And I would urge people who, do have much bigger lists to do that. But I go back to a point that I made earlier. No matter what, up front, somebody in your organization or somebodies in your organization have to spend the time, because an automated process, will give you recency maybe. Okay, so then that's good. Or it'll give you frequency, that's good. But you won't really dig into your customer base and really understand their behaviors. And that's really, once you get there, that's when you can really, I think, have a very, very positive effect on your marketing. A side product, I think, of doing this is that it's wonderful for your content creators. If you spend the time understanding who your market is, what keeps them up at night, what their roles are, what they look like at work, pulling their hair out or sitting there, just at the desk with their hands folded, your content creators can also then use that as they start developing content. And it's really, really good.
And that's a good point. If we're sitting there doing our weekly meeting, sometimes we'll get stumped. We'll see a company, and we actually will look them up right there in the room if our list manager can't figure out how to categorize them. As you can imagine, the pharma and medical device worlds are morphing. They're merging. There's combination products. There's tissue people. They're getting harder and harder to quantify, and sometimes we can't identify actually what market. So we'll grab some of the content people and say, come in, sit down, look. And it's actually a really good conversation, because then they'll start thinking about product ideas, story ideas, and you can see little light bulbs will go off. And we just recently had a whole bunch of tissue folks come onto the file, and
not Kleenex, right?
No, that's what somebody else said in the office. No, we're talking about human tissue, and we won't go into it any more than that. But it being used in a lot of medical devices. Anyway, we brought in the content people, and they were fascinated, because this was sort of a segmentation of the market that really they hadn't been hearing a lot about. And obviously now we're starting to develop additional product for them. They're obviously in there buying stuff that we have, but now we realize we can do more for them. Yeah. There really are not. Honestly, some of these are tiny. I can tell you that probably the smallest bucket is probably 600 people. So 500 or 600. And they morph and they move, but they're pretty tiny. But again, when you're talking about human tissue products, there may not be an awful lot of companies in that, especially on the quality side of human tissue products, which is really where our sweet spot is. There aren't going to be necessarily an awful lot of people in that bucket.
One of the things I'm going to say also is, even if you're going with automation, and if you're large, you will. It's still a continuing process. So you have it in place, you're working on it, you're getting your information back from whoever you're using. But I still think that as the company, you still have to continue to do, whether you want to do surveys, interviews, longer data forms, to get the kind of information that will continue to inform you about who your customer is and how you treat them. And believe me, Cindy could not, if she hadn't segmented that audience, she could not email nearly as much as she does. And I'm on her list, and I see them.
Just a thought just sort of went into my head and went right out of my head. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. Anyway, go ahead.
How do you interact with, say, your more strategic product management side? I've done a lot of work with companies around product management, and we talk market segmentation there, getting that even past the demographics, psychographics, and share problems, segment the market, find that common set. I always tell my people our job should be engaging with marketing and giving them a set. Now, there's customer segments inside of those segments, and there's personas inside of those. How do you guys do that handoff between the more strategic side and the more execution side?
We're a small company, so that
You do both.
and we wear many hats we're only a 30-person company, so I'm active on those other sides of the business. In a bigger company, I just think it's sort of engagement and exposing people to this kind of information. I know our content people really find it fascinating, and they're not offended when we drag them into a meeting, and it gets them thinking.
I just was with a client this week, a publisher, and they kept complaining about the positioning work that their marketing people were doing. And then
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. And that's actually the role that I end up playing sometimes, is that they come in, like somebody will engage me, and they'll say, well, you know, we have this big problem over here. Our editorial doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And then you ask them about their marketing, and you realize that there's a total disconnect. The marketing people don't know who the customers are.
Right.
They don't know who the prospects should be. They have prospects, but it's not who they should be. Right, exactly. No, forget personas. We're not even there. We're just kind of like, well, you know, well, where do your prospects work? I mean, you know, what coast are they on? Are they in the middle of the? We're just even there. So that's a role that I can play sometimes, and I think it's so interesting because they want me to come in and beat up on editorial, and they think it's okay because a while ago I had an editorial background, so I can do it. But really, I have to turn around and say, guys, wait a minute. You know, you need to do your foundation laying, and then we can work with editorial. So I feel your pain.
And one thing I just remembered what I was going to say before. Our list manager actually codes about 85% of these completely correctly. And so a lot of the work is done, even, you know, say before I walk in the room, although I'm eyeballing those. And I see her getting better and better. And the bits that she isn't able to code, I get it. Because, again, they're the people that we sit there and kind of sometimes go, well, wait a minute, who the heck are these companies? It's really not that obvious anymore. So to her credit, I've seen her skills improve and, you know, mature. And so she's become much more expert. And she really appreciates the guidance from me and from the content people. Again, you know, it helps make it possible for her to be okay walking over to a content person and saying, hey, come here for a minute, even before we get into the meeting. I don't get this one, you know. And I see that happening more and more, you know, from doing this kind of collaborative process.
I think we're just about out of time, but just to sort of sum up, I mean, this really, if you use some sort of segmentation, you will be more relevant to your audience. I think that's what our keynoter was talking about this afternoon, is the importance of being relevant. And if you're more relevant, you can market more and your sales will increase. And then you have the byproduct of, you know, of your editorial or your content creators having a better sense of who they're writing for. And I think you'll find you can do more product development based on it. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.